everyone. I am not Lieutenant Christopher Schofield. He wanted to be here, and he's very sorry he wasn't able to make it, but we'll muddle through without him. We do have Christian Ramos with us. He is an advanced analyst at 18th Space. He'll talk to you a little more technically than I will. Get to that at the end. We all want to thank you very much for allowing us to share with you today. So thank you, Alba. Next slide. There we go. I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are, what the heck is an 18th Space anyway, what we do, the state of the space domain as we see it right now, the kinds of data that we share. We'll talk a little bit about spaceflight safety, and Christian will talk to you about his more technical experience tracking the pocket cubes. Okay, next slide, please. The 18th Space Control Squadron, or just 18th Space, is part of the new U.S. Space Force. Our job is to track and catalog all artificial objects in Earth orbit, but we also follow a satellite through its lifetime from launch to reentry or retirement, and we hope not break up. We coordinate with launch providers, not yet, okay, there we go. We coordinate with launch providers, national agencies, companies, academic institutions, and small satellite owners like you from around the world. Okay, now we'll go on. The way we do this is we get tracking data from the worldwide network of sensors on Earth, but also in orbit. We collect millions of observations every month. We take that data, we turn it into orbital data for every object that we can see, and that allows us to keep on keeping track of them. Okay, next slide. This is what we're seeing right now. For most of the last 60 years or so, the increase in space launches was pretty slow and steady. But in the last few years, there's been a dramatic increase with all the smaller satellites and the ride shares. And you can see from starting in 2019, we also started having the mega constellation, and that's made a huge difference. And also the ride shares with huge numbers of satellite on it. The mix goes up very quickly. Also, the number of active satellites has gone up. Just you can see over the last 2 years, it's more than doubled. Just the active satellites, let alone the junk. As you can imagine, 18th Space has had to do some adapting. We've done a lot of work to make sure that we can keep up with all this stuff. Right, go ahead. Thank you. One way that we promote spaceflight safety is through our conjunction assessment services. This is a free service that we provide to all satellite owners. We screen the orbits of all the objects we're tracking, satellites, rocket, just pieces of junk, whatever it is. If we're tracking it, we screen it and compare the orbits with everything. If we see anything, objects getting too close together, it tells us what's going on. We let people know. If one of the satellites is an active satellite, or one of the objects is an active satellite, and we know who the owner is, that owner automatically gets data about that. It tells you how close it's coming and when it's going to happen, this kind of a thing. We generate thousands of these. There's more than 180,000 what are called conjunction data messages every day. And a lot of it goes out to owners automatically if you're signed up with us. It's all for free. If your satellite is getting too close to somebody else's active satellite, we can provide ways for you to connect with the other owner. We actually had a case of this recently. There was a small satellite owner, looked like they were going to be having a close approach with a Starlink, and they were concerned. They said, Cynthia, we don't know what to do. We were able to get them in touch with SpaceX. Turns out SpaceX was just as concerned as they were, and they were able to work together and figure out a way ahead. Okay, next slide. We provide, besides a basic conjunction assessment, we give a lot of data out. Most of it is done through our website, space-track.org. We have, you could tell, probably someone from every nation on Earth is registered on SpaceTrack. Anyone can register on there. It's free and easy. Once you are registered, it gives you access to our satellite catalog, orbital elements for the different objects we're tracking, decay and reentry information, and more. Beyond the basic services, if you need some data that's not on SpaceTrack, we might be able to get it for you. We have what we call an orbital data request. Again, the form is on SpaceTrack. You pull it down if you send us exactly what you need. Maybe you're doing a research project, you want historical data. Tell us what you need and we'll see if we can get it for you. No promises, but we do our best. Okay, next page. There you go. If you haven't seen this before, this is our satellite catalog. This is the most recent page. You can see Lucy just launched. Whenever you see anyone quoting a satellite catalog number or international launch designator, this is where they get that number. It's something that we assign to the satellites as soon as they're launched and we start tracking them. It also functions as a sort of a historical record. Number one on here is Sputnik. Okay, go ahead. Okay, for the Space Situational Awareness Sharing, this is the group that I'm part of. We started the program in 2010, where we do conjunction services for all satellite owners. It started shortly after the Iridium Cosmos collision that created thousands of pieces of junk in orbit. After that, they realized how important it was to share data, and so we started working with people. And as you can see by now, we're working with hundreds of different satellite owners and companies. And we provide the same services for your satellite. Doesn't matter how big the satellite is, you're able to get satellite conjunction assessment. And that includes pocketqube owners. Okay, next page. Some things that you can do as pocketqube owners to help with spaceflight safety starts with mission design. It's safer to be below the space station. Careful of people. May not realize that higher inclination orbits are better tracked, so probably not good to be in low inclination. We recommend having a unique satellite name. You can check on SpaceTrack and see if your name looks like somebody else's. You can adapt it as you need. One thing that's not on this list that I do want to bring up, though, it's very helpful if you have an independent means of identifying your satellite, GPS, something like that, to help us figure out which one is yours. And we also highly recommend for the smaller satellites some kind of device to help you be tracked. They have tracking enhancement devices. There's a lot of different types out there. Whichever one works for you would be helpful. Once you are launched, let me go in the middle part first. Before you launch, we would like to hear from you. Again, on spacetrack.org, there's a satellite registration form. I think there's a link to it on the welcome page. Fill out. It's very easy. We wanted to make it as simple as possible. All we need to know is who are you, who's your satellite, when are you launching, kind of stuff. Send it to us. We'd love to hear from all satellite owners, so don't be shy. And we'll get you set up for the conjunction assessment services, and we'll make sure that we can work with you after launch to make sure we identify your satellite correctly. All right, so that's the end of my portion of the brief. I'm happy to answer any questions when we get to the end, but for now, I'm going to turn it over to Christian.
Everyone, my name is Christian Ramos. Quick mic check. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Cool. So again, my name is Christian. I work for a company called Omitron Inc. We provide contract support for 18 Space for all things from software development, weapon system maintenance, orbital analysis, basically anything Cynthia needs, I'm here to provide for 18 Space. We also represent NASA, National Aeronautics Space Administration, for any of the products and deliveries that they need from the human spaceflight cell of the 18 Space Control Squadron. So let's go ahead and jump to the next slide. So as many of you on this Zoom are probably familiar, at the end of December 2019, 6 pocketqubes were launched into a sub 400 kilometer orbit. And I was the senior analyst who was tasked to attempt to track and identify these pocketqube satellites. The 6 of them are listed here. I have an asterisk for 44831. I believe it was TRS, but I never got confirmation. I had a hard time telling if that was the case, and we never got confirmation from the owner-operator. In fact, if you check the satellite catalog on spacetrack.org, you'll actually see that 44831 is still unnamed to this day. And we'll talk about why that's the case more here in a minute. Next slide, please. So what I wanted to present to you guys here on this slide is what the tracking looked like for each of these pocket cubes. Cynthia talked about the space surveillance network that we have with the Space Force. We have ground and ground-based sensors all over the world, and a handful of space-based sensors as well. And typically, for sub 500 kilometer CubeSats, we typically have a dozen or more ground or space-based sensors sending in metric observations to the 18th space. Pocket cubes presented a new and interesting problem set for the 18th space, where we didn't have the tracking density that we're accustomed to. 44827 through 29, 44827, 28, and 32 actually for the most part weren't too bad. We were able to get an average track per day of 5 to 6 tracks from 4 to 5 different space surveillance network sensors. So with that data, we were able to push a decent amount of TLEs out to owner operators so they could help us delineate who was who. What really gave us a hard time was 44829, 30, and 31. We were only getting 1 to 2 tracks per day, and we really only had one sensor, which for classification purposes, I don't know that I can name in this venue, but we really only had one sensor that was capable of tracking these 3 satellites. In fact, this sensor that we had tracking them was directed by the C2 Center to go into high power mode in an attempt to collect more observations. So we had to increase tasking. 18 Space is in charge of, is the C2 Center for increasing tasking for any object in space. So while the Space Surveillance Network sends in observations, we can direct other space centers from where we are to increase tasking to try to increase power in sending us in more data if possible. So this is a visual representation of what the pocket cubes look like from our mission system. As you can see, 44827, 28, 32 on the money. Like tracking density was pretty good. When we have tracks like this, it's easy for us to push out, more frequent updates for each of these objects. As you'll see here, one of the objects wasn't bad. I couldn't tell if it was 29, 30, or 31. I think it ended up being Phosphosat, which was that purple and pink one there in the middle. But if you see for 30 and 31, the tracking density is extremely sparse. And with that one track a day, I had to somehow make 2 objects out of that. So it made for a difficult time pushing out TLEs. To explain this visual better, typically at the bottom right, we have what sensors are showing each object. For classification purposes, I had to hide when sensors were seeing what. But this is our manual piece separation display from our mission system, and you can see how it tries to detangle some of these observations for us, and it takes a senior analyst to have a man in the loop to help facilitate this process. Next slide, please. So unfortunately, I did have some additional slides on what the covariance looked like for each of these objects. Due to some last-minute releasability issues, we couldn't get this included in the presentation. So maybe at a later time, if people are interested, we could talk more about the covariance of what each of these objects look like. And I have some graphs to facilitate that. I'm sorry I couldn't get that ready in time for this presentation. The long and short of it is just to back up the tracking for each object. 44827, 28, and 32. The covariance for them, in other words, the level of uncertainty for each object to calculate probability of collision wasn't bad. It was really 44829, 30, and 31 that presented some unique challenges for covariance and inevitably calculating any kind of probability of collision if we had any conjunctions with these objects. So some closing remarks. The catalog maintenance of the Pocket Cubes took dozens of man hours for myself and the senior analyst at 18 Space to maintain. To be fair, Alba Orbital, these guys did a fantastic job having early and frequent pre-launch communication with the 18 Space, NASA, and FCC. In fact, I believe the CEO even signed some documentation that they would not launch the Pocket Cubes if there was any pre-launch conjunctions detected by 18 Space with ISS or any of its visiting vehicles. So super kudos for the early pre-launch communication.